Chase Thomas podcast. My nephew needs me to record. See, I already hate it. I hate it.
All right, hello, and welcome back to another episode of the Chase Thomas podcast, where I'm still the aforementioned Chase Thomas, coming to you live from Knoxville, Tennessee. Everything School HQ down there in Tequila, Georgia, FLU University of North Georgia alumni. Matt Green is also here. Matt, good evening, sir. How are you?
Good evening, sir. It is good to be back. It is finally feeling cold. It is finally I feel like, I don't know, is it winter or is it legitimately fall? I don't know what we call it, but it's finally cold down here in Tequila. But yeah, man, it was a big time week of college football. Where do you want to get started?
Not with Tennessee. Not with Tennessee, I don't think, Matt Green.
Is it fair to call it a rivalry now?
No, it's not a rivalry. No, there's not one Tennessee fan who has any kind of animosity towards Missouri fans or the teams or anything. It's like, we don't think about you at all. It's the whole Don Draper, Ginsburg Madman situation. It's just like they look over and they're celebrating and they're like, oh, what a big win on Saturday. And it's like, oh, we really showed Tennessee. It's like, yeah, we don't really think about you at all. Like, you're not at the same level. Like, this is a top 3 NIL program. This is a program that's dominating all across the board. This is a program that has a Coliseum in Neyland Stadium, 102,000 people. This is a program that has won national titles in the last 25 years. This is a program that can still recruit at a level that can win a national title. This is still a program that beat you and outscored you by like 75 total points in the last 2 years. Like, look, good win. It's good.
Hey, we can't be talking about the last 2 years when Missouri just came out and dominated on
Yes,
Saturday.
we can, because you asked if it's a rivalry. It's like, no, not really. I mean, sometimes it happens.
6-6 since they joined the SEC. That sounds
fine.
like a rivalry in my book.
It's fine.
They don't have a clever name like the Battle for Columbia, like they do with the South Carolina series, but
No.
I think Missouri's got to consider Tennessee a rivalry.
They can consider it all they want. Tennessee will never consider Missouri a rival. Like, that's not a thing. It will never happen. It will never be a thing.
We'll see. A little more Eli Drinkowitz talking shit. It could become a thing, but
no. They want it to be a thing because that adds to Missouri relevance by making it a thing. That helps Missouri. If Tennessee claims Missouri, that helps Missouri. That is jumping on the back of a prominent, big-time blue blood brand in college football for the young upstarts. No, that's not a thing. Nope, won't do it.
Well, I mean,
Won't
with the
happen.
SEC East coming to an end, it's like it's not going to be a thing. So there's not really a chance for it to be an every year thing. But big
Such a
win
shame.
for sure. Let's just dive into it.
No,
I mean,
hold
happened?
on. We're not doing that first. I don't want to do it. I don't want to talk
Let's
about
just get it
right
out of the way.
I don't want to talk about it, Matt Green. We'll talk about it in a second. I want to talk about something that's more interesting. Texas A&M. Over the weekend, they fired their coach, Jimbo Fisher. $75 million buyout. I mean, I did not see that coming, especially the timing was weird because it was like reported that they came to the decision before the game on Saturday, and he still coached anyway. And they blasted Mississippi State at home, even though Mississippi State like returned the opening kick, and you're like, oh, is this going to go a totally different way? And Texas A&M obviously won by 40 plus. But I look at this, and I mean, this was something that I think had to happen based on where they were. I mean, him actually being less successful than Kevin Sumlin over their two tenures was pretty wild to consider. A lot of talent, a lot of 5 stars, some big time classes over the last couple of years. The expectations were high, and injuries kind of derailed some stuff. But he also may not have been in this situation if Jimbo had hired Bobby Petrino a year ago. If you had 2 years of this kind of offense that we've seen this year, maybe they're looking at a different kind of situation altogether. But it was too little too late, and there's just too much money on the line. There's too much talent on the line. Texas and Oklahoma are coming into the conference next year. You kind of just need to get out ahead of this, Matt Green. So I think it was the right move for A&M, and if they can afford to eat that kind of money, then look, I'm a big believer. It's like, I don't like holes of like, oh, well, he won 4 down the stretch, so maybe he's turned the corner. No, it's like you should always operate under the belief of like, hey, either one of two things. You believe this is the coach who is going to get you there, or you don't. There's not this arbitrary, if he wins 8 games, then maybe, no, you either believe in him or you don't. So seems clear that they did not believe he was going to be able to get them to that final level of winning national titles, making the playoffs, things like that. And if that's the case, look, saving 60 or going from 65 million to 75 million a year, no, that's just a waste of time. It's going to be a big number no matter what. So if you don't believe Jimbo's the guy to guide you there in 2024 and beyond, then you got to make this kind of move. It's a staggering number. The figure is insane to look at, but I mean, I get it, and I think the A&M job is going to be extremely, extremely interesting to see which names pop up and who ultimately gets this job. What say you, Matt Green?
Yeah, I think the buyout number is still why it's surprising. Like they were clearly underachieving, but man, paying someone $76 million not to coach, that's wild to me. But like you said, he was 45 and 25 in 70 games. Sumlin was 48 and 22 after his first 70. Ended up 51 and 26 overall. And it's like Sumlin was the 8-5 king. Like it was good, but nothing special outside of the 1 year where you had a generational quarterback. And that's basically what Jimbo had, other than the generational quarterback. He had 1 year in what is this, year 8? 1 year where they lost less than 4 games. So it's like it's not going to get it done. I felt like, there might be a little bit of some context this season with another injury to the starting quarterback. Like, I mean, this team without their starting quarterback lost to Alabama by a touchdown, to Tennessee by a touchdown, to Ole Miss by 3 points on the road. Like, those are 3 top 15 teams, top 20 teams in college football. So it's not, and the Miami loss, obviously early on, they had 4 losses, but I don't know. It didn't seem like it was bad enough to fire him right now. But I mean, I obviously see the win-loss record, and compared to what he did against Kevin Sumlin, and if what Sumlin did wasn't good enough, then what Jimbo's doing with that much more money and that much more NIL resources and all that, I get it. I guess I get it. The timing surprises me a little bit, but I do get it.
But you also want to get out ahead of this. You want to get this search started. You're not playing for anything down the stretch. I mean, I think the timing makes sense, honestly, because you want to beat out potentially an Arkansas for a guy you want. You want to get out of some of these other jobs that might open up. And it's also, I thought it was funny, like a lot of coaches are just smiling, big-time coaches around the league, where guess what? Now a lot of dudes are about to get raises because their agent's going to float that they are maybe interested in looking at the A&M job and the money that might be offered to them there. So we're going to see some raises from some coaches that probably don't deserve it because they're going to float the A&M job as a possibility, and kind of like see if they can leverage that a little bit. So that's always a fun part of these cycles. But I wonder to you, Matt Green, is it fair to compare it? Because I'm seeing a lot of comparisons to LSU when it opened up after Orgeron, right? That it's a sleeping giant, that it's just a quick fix, that there's a lot of talent there. I'm like, I don't think this is as good of a job as LSU. And I don't know if it's like a slam dunk where, I mean, LSU got pretty dicey at the end. Remember, like Brian Kelly kind of came out of nowhere late in the process, but it looked like, remember early on, it was Lane, it was Jimbo. Funny enough, where it was like, is LSU going to pull Jimbo from A&M? And it was going to be an uninspiring final.
Lincoln Riley, I think, was kind of
maybe a little. Yeah,
LSU.
I think that's right. But ultimately, Brian Kelly comes out of nowhere, and it's turned out to be a pretty good hire. And I think Brian Kelly will eventually get there with this group and with the amount of talent. I think he's a top 10 coach in this league, so I think they'll be fine. It was a good hire. I don't know if the A&M job's going to go like that. I have no idea, because you see all the names where it could go all over the place. Like you see Traylor from UTSA, you see Lane Kiffin, you see Mike Elko. I've heard Dan Quinn's thrown around at DC with the Cowboys. Remember, he has some college experience at Florida and company. And I don't know, you're just seeing names from all over the place. Kalen DeBoer up in Northwest, like Glenn Schumann popped up from Georgia. I've never seen a more diverse opening, just who could be the next coach of A&M. Mike Norvell, just go back-to-back Florida State coaches if you're A&M. I don't know. Like, there are a whole heck of a lot of names, but where would you guess, or not even where would you guess, because it's hard to just put yourself in Ross Bajork's shoes here with this hire. But if you were Ross right now and you're conducting the search, where would you target and who would make the most sense to you when you think about the big time names or even some off the radar names?
Yeah, it's interesting because I feel like with Texas A&M, like they like to start with the first part you're saying, like no, A&M's nowhere close to as good of a job as LSU. Like LSU's the last 3 guys they've hired have won national championships. So like A&M hasn't won a national championship in 100 years. So it's definitely not that level. It's a good job with a lot of money and a lot of like access to the recruiting footprint and everything, you know? So obviously A&M has a lot of things going for it, but it doesn't have anything going for it that like every single other powerhouse program in the Southeast doesn't also have going for them with also more recent history of national championships. So it's up there. It's a good job. It's not necessarily like we talk about all the money A&M's got, and it's like, yeah, that's fine. But a lot of schools have a lot of money. You still got to do the right thing with it. So when I look at A&M, obviously Mike Elko's name is one that gets thrown out a lot with his experience with Jimbo. You almost worry, does his experience with Jimbo hurt him? That it's like, we're trying to go a complete new direction. We don't want to bring any of the Jimbo era back. Glenn Schumann is a guy, like this guy was under Kirby Smart, and he saw like Kirby Smart didn't leave until he got a powerhouse job offer. So Glenn Schumann, when he leaves Georgia, he's going to get some sort of powerhouse offer, in my opinion. It just depends on which one comes along. But A&M doesn't feel like the type of job that A&M feels like they're going to make a splash, like because we always talk about their money and everything. Like they poached Jimbo Fisher from Florida State, a national championship winning coach. So a guy like Mike Norvell, I think it would be a bad move. A Dan Lanning, that doesn't make sense to me. You know, maybe Kalen DeBoer, you know, maybe A&M's a better job than Washington. I'm not really sure it is. I definitely think Oregon's a better job. So Lane Kiffin is one that like A&M's got a higher ceiling than Ole Miss, in my opinion. So it's like, that's one I could understand happening. But yeah, I mean, I feel confident they're going to get a guy with experience that's like got some name recognition that you could get excited about.
I mean, it's funny, but I mean, Lane does make the most sense. And you listen to his comments after the Ole Miss game where it's like, we just have to recruit better. He was pretty demoralized after the Ole Miss game last night. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. But I wonder if that leads to it. I mean, he was flirting with the Auburn job this past cycle. His name popped up, obviously, with LSU. I think people are just like assuming that he's going to jump back to this sounds, I don't mean to say it in like a disrespectful way, but like just the big boy ball, the 5 stars. And like, there's a ceiling for Mississippi. There's a ceiling for Mississippi State. There's a ceiling for Mizzou, who we'll talk about in a little bit. There's a ceiling for Kentucky and what you can ultimately be.
But A&M's got a different ceiling than some of those. I think.
Well, that's what I'm saying. It's a different ceiling. So if he jumps, this is a jump up where Lane wants to win championships again. Like Lane wants to get
Mark
back.
Stoops or something that could, you know.
That's a tough sell, though. That's a tough.
There's a tendency, though. It seems like when you get the offensive minded coach and it doesn't work out, and you fire him, you go to the defensive minded coach. Now, it feels like there's a tendency for programs, college and pro, to do things like that. So,
but they did go back to back offensive coaches.
That's fair, and neither one of them worked out that well. So I don't know. Like, do they go try to get James Franklin or something? Because Franklin feels like his seat's getting hot up in Penn State. Like, who knows? But I
love the Dan Quinn idea because I don't hate going NFL here a little bit because I think this is sneaky. Like when you look at the budget and you look at the 5 stars and you look at what it's going to cost to keep a lot of these guys, because that's the other part of it. It's like, you can't even look at these jobs anymore when there is stacked 5-star classes like A&M has. Like, it's a more appealing job pre-portal where, yeah, those guys are all locked in. Like, a lot of those guys aren't jumping out. Like, hey, this is a plug and play. Like, look at all these guys I get to walk into that I don't even recruit. These are other people's players that I get to just take over. It's like, oh, 5-star here, 5-star there. This is amazing. I get a 5-star quarterback, 5-star wide receiver, 5-star running back. That's awesome. What a great situation. That's not how it's going to go. Like, you're going to have to immediately recruit and keep all these guys that Jimbo brought in that is going to be extremely arduous. That like we're going to see how many keeps. Some people are going to leave. Like you're going to lose some people from your class that you have right now here. So I think in terms of these jobs now, I think you have to be, it's so much more complicated than it used to be. And even walking into these, it's just kind of, man, I don't envy these new coaches coming into these situations because you immediately have to hit the ground running, not just recruiting for the next class, but recruiting these guys who are in the building that you have no relationships with, that you have to convince that it's in their best interest to stay and all that. Like, it's just a lot. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. I think it's going to be interesting to see which way they go, because if you go NFL or somebody like that, maybe you can keep more of them who have more of an NFL understanding, because this is a very NIL money based operation, you know, where it's just like, that's what we've heard for years now, is like A&M's NIL budget, and what they're doing is just second to none. So when you look at it that way, I mean, you have Nick Saban taking shots a year ago and all that. Like, I wonder if that's where you go. You just like NFL eyes this thing even more, and you just hire an NFL guy, and you're like, hey, yeah, like we're running an NFL operation down here.
Hey, we haven't even talked about the biggest splash that could possibly be, and it's Coach Prime. Like, we know about his Texas roots and high school recruiting to Texas. Like, Deion Sanders, that would definitely, it's only a matter of time till he's coming to one of those bigger jobs. Like, everyone saw the buzz he created at Colorado in 1 year. Like, I don't know. I wouldn't rule it out.
I'm a believer he's waiting out Alabama. That's my thing, is I think he's waiting out Alabama.
I don't know.
Could be wrong, but that's what I've said for years. But we shall see, Matt Green. Your early prediction. Give me a prediction. It's day one. You could look like clairvoyant Matt Green. Who do you guess right now on November 12th? Who gets the A&M job?
Lane Kiffin.
Okay. I'm going to go Mike Elko. I think they do go safe, and they do go someone in the family, and DC's recruited well in the area. And like you said, they go opposite in a lot of these. I don't think they go three straight. That's what I was
thinking. Lane Kiffin feels like just a younger version of Jimbo, like a guy shit talker, like poking the bear of Nick Saban and all that.
And maybe he keeps by Petrino, because that's what I would also do. I would keep Petrino. The offense has been a lot better, and Petrino's one of the best play callers. Like, I would, if you hire Elko, you can maybe keep Petrino and not lose a lot there, because that might be a bigger appeal to hiring a defensive-minded guy. Is just you want to hire defense and then keep Petrino installed as the OC.
And I mean, Elko's a big reason why, you know, a lot of those big-time recruits wanted to come to A&M on the defensive side of the ball. Like, he's a big part of what the guys that are currently there.
Absolutely. All right, Matt Green. Week 11 in the books here. How did the pick'em go for both of us?
It was another excellent week for us on the pick'em. I just can't make up any ground on Chase Thomas over there. So both of us went 9-2 overall on the weekend. I went 8-3 against the spread, which I was very proud of. But Chase Thomas over here went 9-2 against the spread. So killing it this week, up to 59.5% on the season against the spread to my 54.5. So, you know, what can you do? Zeus, Penn State let him down. Only his fourth loss of the season. So he's 11-4, sitting at 73.3% on the season. So still killing it. But yeah, Nittany Lions let him down this weekend.
Interesting. All right. Matt Green, let's go to Georgia first, and we'll talk Tennessee. We'll talk about your dogs first. This was where Chase was right. I said Carson Beck would have a big day. I had questions about Ole Miss's defense, last home game of the year. Dogs are getting up for this. Like, this night game, and we know Kirby's history with night game. Everything about this screamed, go to a nice dinner with your wife. Go to the movies for the second half. Go do anything other than watch the last 30 minutes of this football game. And I was right, because not only did Georgia blow out Ole Miss, it wasn't even close. Like, this was significantly worse than what we saw the week prior against Missouri, Matt Green. And this was a shellacking all across the board. But as the Georgia expert on this very show, sir, how did Georgia blow out Ole Miss?
I think it's just because they could not stop this offense. Georgia ran for 300 yards, passed for 300 yards. Carson Beck is absolutely dealing. Like Carson Beck, I'll say it right now. This is no disrespect to the legend that was number 13, Stetson Bennett. Carson Beck is better than Stetson Bennett. Like he's he's a better thrower of the football. Like Stetson Bennett's got some moxie and he made plays with his legs. And Beck's an underrated athlete, too. You saw multiple times in this game where he was able to run for first downs. Like the way, just with how crisp Georgia's offense looks, especially in the big games this year, I would say this offense looks better than last year's offense with Mike Bobo compared to Todd Monken. Offense just looks like it's just firing on all cylinders right now. Like Ole Miss, like you said, it's not the best defense they're going to play this season by any means, but just to see Georgia come out and score touchdowns on their first 4 drives of the game, could have been 5th. That they got the interception before the half and wasted a lot of time for whatever reason, and then Carson Beck, we threw the interception on an absolute dime, honestly. Like that ball was thrown like in the exact spot, could have been down inside the 10, but went off Dominic Lovett's hands and got picked off. But I felt like, and then you got Bowers back. I think that surprised, for what you were hearing from reports, you were not surprised by the time kickoff came. I mean, they were hyping up that this guy was balling out in practice on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. So he looked as good as ever. Like he's breaking tackles, like his very first catch got like a little lateral, like jump cut. And it's like, okay, that's a good test right there, right off the bat. So to get Bowers back in this lineup, you could see the difference he makes. Like the Florida game and the Missouri game, like Georgia's offense still looked really good in both those games. More so probably the Florida game than the Missouri game. But you saw on that first touchdown to Ladd McConkey, like Bowers runs a post and 2 defenders go with him, and it just opens up McConkey. And there's just so many playmakers with Rosemead Jack Saint, Ra Thomas, Dominic Lovett, McConkey. It's like this passing offense is, as far as the contenders in the college football playoff right now, I think Georgia's got the best offense of any of the contenders.
Wow. I don't think that's off the mark here. I was thinking about it. I mean, maybe Florida State, Michigan, maybe. But I still trust Georgia over Michigan in that situation. Maybe Ohio State's figuring some stuff out based on what we saw this week. I think they have the most talent out wide to push Georgia. See, that's the thing. Keon Coleman, I think, would cause problems for Georgia, him and Walker and their size and seeing what that would do. But they're causing problems for everybody. So just Marvin Harrison. We talk about Brock Bowers being just an absolute freak in nature. But, I mean, Marvin Harrison also just an unguardable freak that, like, him and Ibuka and company, we've seen what they've done to Georgia through the passing game. The difference, though, and why I don't think they're as big of a threat as they were a year ago, is just the drop off from Kyle McCord to CJ Stroud, I think, is pretty large. And I just don't think you have that kind of talent who CJ Stroud is just dealing in the NFL right now. And I just think you saw in that Georgia game was just he's a special quarterback. So I don't, and what we've seen in the past, to beat Kirby Smart, it requires a special quarterback performance. And I just don't think that's McCord.
And that's the thing. And like this year, like you could say Ohio State's defense, you could say Michigan's defense has been better than Georgia's. But like if you get into a shootout, are you ever going to feel like anyone really truly has a better defense than Georgia? Like, yeah, they could statistically be slightly better, but Georgia's basically going to be as good defensively as anyone they're playing against. And you've seen, especially lately, this is the 4th straight game that Georgia's given up a touchdown on the opening drive of the game. And it's basically like Kirby and Schumann and Muschamp. They're like, okay, this is what they want to do. Bet we're going to figure out how to stop it. Like Ole Miss had, I think, 185 yards on their first 3 possessions of the game, scored 2 touchdowns. Their only 2 touchdowns of the game. I mean, that was basically half of their offense for the entire game that happened on those first 3 drives. And then from then on out, like they just weren't able to stop Georgia. And I think that's kind of what I saw. We both kind of predicted this game similarly, is that Ole Miss would score some points, but ultimately Georgia's offense wasn't going to get stopped. And I think way more so than I thought, putting up a 50 number. But yeah, I think this Carson Beck, Bowers, and this running game really coming along. Like, this is the best game of Kendall Milton's career, honestly. And so you've seen what this guy can do when he's healthy. Can he stay healthy for 14, 15 games, however many it takes for Georgia to make another national championship run? But if this running game can be as good as it was, this offense is basically unstoppable.
So what did you see out of Kendall and Brock Bowers specifically? What popped for you and for both of them in this game?
I felt like Bowers for one was just looking like Brock Bowers, and then he just doing Brock Bowers things. He wasn't used like he normally is, but I mean, you saw that touchdown. I forget what kind of route. I think Ben Watson called it like a viper route, where he just comes and just breaks down the linebacker and just runs right around him. It's like, okay, this guy's operating on the level that he's supposed to be. But Kendall Milton, like, he was running hard, just breaking tackles, like, had that burst, like a couple of like 30-yard runs in this game. So it was just nice to see. Like, Dejon Edwards, I've always felt like no shade to Dejon Edwards, because he's the one been carrying the running game all season, but he's just a guy who feels like he's good and isn't necessarily that top end guy. Not that Kendall Milton is that top end guy, but when healthy, it feels like he's got a higher ceiling. So when you got two guys like that, that's just, you always want multiple healthy guys in the running game, because anything can happen at that position. But I think Georgia's offense is really is clicking as good as ever at this point in the season.
Interesting. And I wonder too, like, did Ole Miss go wrong when you're watching this game? You're like, oh, Ole Miss, what are you doing? Like, was there something where you're like, this is not how you want to attack Georgia? What did you see Ole Miss do that just did not work and led to them kind of getting beaten down by this Georgia team?
It's hard to say, because it feels like Georgia just makes adjustments, because Ole Miss was having success early. Like, Jackson Dart was making a few plays. Like, they hit the tight end on the wheel route, like, got him wide open. Because that's one thing I was worried about when you look at Georgia with Jamon Dumas-Johnson, Butkus finalist out. Butkus finalist from a year ago out. It's like C.J. Allen and Raylan Wilson, two true freshmen, were really filling in that absence. And C.J. Allen went on to lead Georgia in tackles in this game, and I think he's the one that's really creating a lot of buzz. Like, and that's got to be the frustrating part when if you're a fan of another team watching Georgia play. It's like, okay, they're junior, senior, whatever year Dumas Johnson is. Experienced inside linebacker gets hurt, they got to bring in a true freshman, and this guy balls out and leads them in tackles. So that's just the embarrassment of riches Georgia has on the defensive side of the ball. But I think Quinshon Junkins was able to run it a little bit, like 75 yards in this game, especially when you get in the red zone, because I think that's the one area that you can definitely criticize Georgia's defense, is like, it's almost an automatic touchdown when teams get inside 10 yards. And Judkins had two pretty easy runs that just, I think they had a 1st and goal from like the 5 where he ran it in, and it was a penalty, and then was 1st and goal from the 15, and they just ran it on the next play. So I think that's one area where Georgia's been, a little questionable. But I mean, 45 carries for 179 yards on the ground for Ole Miss. Like, that's a good, rushing production on the ground. But at the same time, it's only 4 yards a carry. So if you want to do that and you're going to give up 50 points on the other end, like, Georgia will probably take that all day. But I mean, you got to look at, I guess Tennessee is going to try to attack Georgia a similar way on the ground. So, if it feels like every Georgia game, there is like a shot early where someone gets a guy running deep down the field, and more times than not, they don't hit it. So, if Joe Milton can hit one of those, like we remember Hendon Hooker a year ago, or in 2021 at least, getting that early on and missing that open deep ball. It's like Jackson Dart had one of these on one of Ole Miss's early drives. So, we'll see. The secondary's been pretty good against most of the teams they've played. So this is probably the best secondary in the SEC, if not the best secondary in college football. So I think if you're going to get Georgia, it's probably, on the ground, and then you got to open up the passing game that way.
Yeah, and I mean, the matchup's good, and I wonder, I mean, this kind of leads us into Tennessee, is I think, look, there's not a great way to play Georgia, but I do think there not being stakes makes the game better for Georgia, or for Tennessee. Like they're Georgia already being clinched to get to Bama. They can lose the or the Tennessee game and it not be a big deal because they just beat Bama. They're in the playoff and everything's fine. Like I think that is still where they're at. Now, if this was a game for the East, like we saw a year ago, Georgia's going to get up for that. Georgia's going to travel. It's a different kind of week for Georgia in preparation. Now, if Tennessee licking their wounds with this loss and this drubbing to Mizzou, Mizzou's a good football team. Like I made a lot of jokes at the top of the show about the rivalry aspect of it. That doesn't matter. What matters is Tennessee got their ass kicked in all phases in this game. And that was not something that I really saw coming. Cody Schrader.
Well, hold on. Before you get into this game, though, the last thing I'll say just about Georgia is I think that's the biggest thing when you're trying to do something historical is like that's the stakes for Georgia. It's 27 straight games, winning streak. It's like trying to make history, trying to have whatever streak of being ranked number 1 in the AP poll, trying to win a 3rd straight national championship, like trying to be perfect. So. It might not have the same SEC East stakes, but it's Georgia, Tennessee, and Knoxville, and it's gonna be a big time environment.
Oh, I'm not disagreeing with any of that. I'm just saying broad strokes. It's better for Tennessee that there's no stakes to this one for Georgia and Tennessee.
I saw some Ole Miss podcaster. I don't remember his name, but he said the biggest compliment you can get in college football this year is that Georgia cares enough about you to beat the hell out of you. It's like they didn't care about Missouri, they didn't care about Auburn, or they didn't. They were kind of sleepwalking with some of these games. But Kentucky and Florida and Ole Miss, like those had the big game atmosphere, and they came out and dominated.
I like that. It's mean, but I like it. Vols crushed by Mizzou, as I talked about just a second ago. Look, I think this also proved Missouri and Georgia, the game last week, was really the SEC East battle crown for that one. Mizzou played Georgia really well on the road. They didn't let that loss throw them off at all. Like they were able to rally and bounce back and just, hey, we lost a close game. We gave it our all in Athens. Georgia's a different beast. Let's regroup and get ready for Tennessee. And they were ready. Brady Cook, some big 3rd down runs, 3rd and longs. The game really flipped, and I wonder how this game goes if Jalen Wright doesn't fumble right at the end of the first half where Tennessee's driving. They're down, what was it? They're down 7-3, I think, at that point. And Tennessee right there. Like you get points, you get the ball back, start the second half too. So Tennessee was right there. And not only, or it was 10-7, it was 10-7 Mizzou. And they're driving down, so field goal ties it, and you get the ball back, momentum going into the half, all that. Instead, you fumble the ball away instead of scoring a touchdown, either taking a lead or a tie going into the half with the ball back. Then you proceed to give up 2 plays to Cody Schrader back-to-back, just huge runs that get them into field goal range, and then they steal 3 points. Like the defense wasn't ready at all to go back on the field. The vibe just completely changed. Like you went in the locker room suddenly down 13-7, a full touchdown, and they just never came back from that.
Yeah, it felt like that was just a run. Let's just go to the half.
Yes.
And it busted it for 40 yards or whatever it was, and that changed everything.
100%. And look, Joe Milton was not the problem in this game, but what we said on this show, when I've talked with the Tennessee sports guys, is like part of what's flipped is that Joe is really, really strong as a game manager when he's when he's on top. When he is winning and the offense is rolling, he's hard to beat. Him in this group is hard to beat. He's running the ball with a purpose. He's running over dudes. He's passing well. He's just it's kind of just like a runaway train when Tennessee is starting off strong because Joe is confident and the whole just machine of the Heupel offense is rolling, and they're really, really hard to stop when that happens. We've seen it against A&M. We've seen it against South Carolina. We've seen it against Kentucky. We saw it against UConn last week where that game ended in quick fashion, where when they're rolling, it's still a scary thing, especially at home because this team has not lost a home game since Georgia in 2021. He doesn't have the ability to come from behind. And that's the biggest issue is that, like, when you get down 2 scores, he just doesn't have the Brady Cook stuff where Brady Cook is going to run on 3rd and 10 and keep a drive alive. Joe Milton's not going to do that. Joe Milton had some bad runs in this one where he just second guesses himself, and he kind of reverted back to what he was in the Florida game in some ways. in this one, and Hendon would have taken off, where there's just some stuff where it's like, if things aren't there, Dante Thornton has a touchdown catch, like a bomb, and is immediately hurt and knocked out of the game. Like, you've already lost Brew McCoy for the year. Then you lose Thornton. Like, you're just dropping bodies left and right in the receiver room. So injuries are killing him on that front. But, I mean, he's just not that guy. Like, Joe Milton is a play from ahead quarterback. Like, when Tennessee is rolling, when they're running the ball well, he's a good game manager. He's a good guy to have leading your team in that fashion. But when things go awry in the second half of Alabama, when things start just spiraling, this team does not know how to face adversity on the road. They just have not been able to figure that out in the SEC by and large. And it's just tough. Like, they have to get through this. If you want to make it to that next level, if you want to really compete for SEC titles, you're going to have to get over this. Like, this was just an implosion in the second half. You have to get up off the mat. You have to bounce back from that bad fumble. You have to be able to just get punched in the mouth and be down 2 scores on the road in the SEC and be able to come back and be able to be like, hey, we're fine. Let's calm down. Let's keep running the ball. Let's keep getting back to what works each and every week. And they just don't. Like, Heupel had a terrible punt call at the end of the third quarter where the defense can't get a stop. You're down 2 scores and you're on their 38 and he punted. It was 4th and 11, whatever. Doesn't matter. Your defense hasn't gotten a stop all game long. You just go for it and see what happens. Like, it doesn't matter. Like, pinning him up, and Jackson Ross is a stud. Like, he's an absolute assassin punter, and he was doing a great job in this game. But you got to go for it. It was just like now he's gotten too conservative with some of these 4th down play calls because I think he's spooked from some of these failures early in the year. And he had a bad one against Florida, and everyone remembers, but he was a little over aggressive early in the year. Now he's going the other way where he's not aggressive enough, where it's like, hey man, your defense is getting cooked. Like, the linebackers, look, you lost Keenan Pili for the year. Aaron Carter is out for the year now. You're very thin. You're basically playing a true freshman a bunch, and Jeremiah Telander. You're playing Elijah Herring, who's not a starter in the SEC. Like, he's getting cooked. 44, he was the lowest PFF grade. He couldn't keep up with Schrader to save his life. And Mizzou, to their credit, was like, hey, we're going to go outside zone over and over and over again, and then we're just going to throw it to Schrader out of the backfield after he chips one of our guys. And the linebacker for Tennessee is not going to be able to keep up with him because he's not fast enough. And they just kept doing that over and over and over again because there was no answer. It's kind of like Kyle Pitts against Georgia a couple years ago, where it's like, hey, what are you going to do with that wheel route to Kyle Pitts? Nothing, because you don't have the personnel to stop the unicorn tight end. Like, that play will work every single time. So why would you not just keep calling it over and over again? Schrader, there was no answer in the linebackers for Tennessee to be able to keep up with Schrader. There was no personnel that they could throw that could fix that. So, I mean, it's bad. The defense is banged up. The linebackers are banged up. The corners are banged up. I don't know. This was a bad loss, but it's also like, what have I always said? This is a gap year for Tennessee. And I think every Tennessee fan looked at it as a gap year. You have Nico coming in next year, a lot more talent infusion coming in next year. You had the special year a year ago with Hendon Hooker and company. You lost a lot of NFL talent. Joe is just not the dude. Joe is not the guy who's going to lead you to 10, 11 wins in a regular season. He can get you to 8-4, 9-3. And that's okay. Like, if you end up 8-4 with a loss to Georgia and then you beat Vanderbilt and win your bowl game and finish 9-4, that's fine. That's hey, there were some bad losses like the Missouri game, like Florida, but that's still
Tennessee's come a long way if that's their bad year.
Right. You're back-to-back 6-2 going in November. That hasn't happened in over 15 years, Matt Green. So it's like, hey, baby steps. Like, just be really good for a while and keep the class, keep it moving, get Nico and acclimated and company going into next year. And like, hey, things will be a little bit different and a lot more upside there, especially at the quarterback position. But I don't know. I mean, hats off to Mizzou. They were a much better football team. They're a much better football team than Tennessee this year. And we'll see what happens with Tennessee and Neyland on Saturday, because as much as it looks bad and Georgia's marching in, playing at full strength, Tennessee's a different animal at home. Like, it's just different in Neyland. It's the reason the spread's 10. 2 years ago, this is how far these two teams have come. It was over 20-point spread for Tennessee, Georgia 2 years ago when Georgia came into Neyland Stadium. It's down to 10. It opened at like 9.5. So you've cut it in half 2 years, the talent gap a little bit. So I think, hey, Georgia did not cover at Auburn. Georgia did not cover at Vanderbilt. You saw some problems for Georgia on the road in the SEC. You saw they have issues stopping the run a little bit this year. You're at home. Tennessee will run the ball better at home. There's some ways to talk yourself into it being a close game on Saturday. I'll be in the building. I'm going to talk myself into it all week long, but you can't unsee what was the worst game, I think, in the Heupel era at Tennessee. 7 points, least amount of points he scored there, and it was a disaster on both sides of the ball. You can't unsee it. So I didn't monitor, but it was awful, Matt Green. Did not enjoy it. 0 out of 10, no stars. Don't want to talk about it anymore.
Would not recommend. But yeah, I think going on the road, that was my biggest concern. You've seen, the Kentucky game, they did escape with a win on the road. But you saw Florida play their game of the season at home versus Tennessee. You saw Missouri now play their game of the season at home versus Tennessee. So I think, that's definitely something you got to get corrected. Being able to go on the road and win in the SEC is not an easy thing to do. Did you feel like they gave up on the run too early in this game? Like you see Jaylen Wright with 7 carries, Jabari Small with 3 carries, Dylan Sampson with 3 carries, and that's pretty much it. And they held this Tennessee team to 83 yards rushing. It just felt like they abandoned the run too early when that's kind of their identity. I mean, this was still a 1-score game into the third quarter. It wasn't like it was just a blowout from the jump.
Well, you got to remember, they had 3 plays in the first quarter. Mizzou had a Army-ass drive of 18 plays at this point. Like, you look at it, Missouri was just able to keep the ball a bunch. So it's not like Tennessee had a lot of opportunities, especially in the first half, to really establish the run and do anything like that. I think Jaylen Wright got cooked. So once he had that fumble and he had a couple bad drops out of the backfield, I think he was just kind of out of it. So you can't really go back to him. And then you went to Dylan Sampson a little bit too late in the process. So I probably would have gotten him some more carries. But it was also, here's the problem. You can give him carries. Mizzou kicked the crap out of Tennessee's offensive line. Like, Tennessee, as healthy as they've been on the offensive line this week, like, that was the worst they've played all year. That was the worst Tennessee's offensive line's been pushed around. And you didn't see it in the sacks. You just saw it on both sides of the line of scrimmage where the trenches were won by Mizzou. Mizzou had better offensive linemen and they had better defensive linemen in this game. They won that battle. So it's like you could run it up, but Tennessee couldn't run on them. Like, they just did not have the personnel. Like, if the linemen are getting beat like that, like, it just, especially when the light boxes, because Tennessee's spreading you out so much, like, what do you do? Like, there is no, you can run the ball. They're not going anywhere though.
Yeah, absolutely. And just shout out to Cody Schrader, just first player in SEC history, 200 yards rushing and 100 yards receiving. Like, that's just stupid. It would be, and somehow it was still the second stupidest stat line in the SEC this week.
Well, let's get into that, Matt Green, because I ask you, LSU, they blow out Florida. Florida now really, I don't think bowl game. You're feeling good about a bowl game for Florida right now. I don't know what that means.
Mizzou looks even better than we thought, kind of a week.
I mean, Mizzou and Florida State down the stretch here, like, I don't think they're going bowling, Matt Green. We talked about it last week. If Florida would go bowling, this was a game you had to have because I think Mizzou is really, really good. And I just watched them beat the crap out of my team. And I think Tennessee is better than Florida, even with that early season loss. I mean, my thing, though, is Jayden Daniels the only correct Heisman choice? Because I don't know how you don't give it to Jayden Daniels at this point. Like, he's putting up numbers, and he's just an offensive Chico. There's not a better offensive player in college football this year in terms of what he is doing to keep his team afloat. Like, the defense is still getting torched. Like, what he did against Mizzou, what he did against Florida now, what he did putting his body on the line against Alabama. Like, Jayden Daniels is the Heisman to me. Like, I don't even think it's close at this point. If Jayden Daniels finishes the year, his numbers are so ridiculous. I just don't know how he's not. It's a Johnny Manziel type deal, but just a bigger version to me. I think he's the Heisman. Do you agree, Matt Green?
I agree, and I will also run back that I was just so dead wrong about Jayden Daniels. Like, this guy was just kind of like that Jalen Hurts kind of mold, just kind of at Alabama, like just kind of the game manager that could run for 800-900 yards. It's like, that's better than your average game manager. It's better than Greg McElroy for sure. But this guy is a superstar. Like, he has just got legit track speed. Like, that run where he just goes up the left side, gets to the corner, and it's just like he's gone. Like, he's just, quarterback just ran for 85 yards. Like, he just outran the entire defense. Like, 234 yards, 2 touchdowns on the ground. Like, 20 yards a carry on the ground, basically, like 372 yards and 3 touchdowns. Like, this guy's got to be the Heisman right now. It's ridiculous what he's doing, especially because LSU can't stop anybody.
No.
Like, it's the offense that's having to carry them to every single victory. So it's absurd what he's doing right now. But yeah, he's definitely the Heisman. I remember in our just talking with Florida, and in my group thread, one of my buddies is a huge Florida fan, and going into the Georgia game, like they're 5-2, and he's talking about this is a game for the SEC East, all this. And then the group thread evolves into like, are we sure Florida's going to make a bowl game? It was not it took a turn that he was not prepared for. And now you've seen, what is this? They're sitting at 5-5. What is that? The 4th straight loss, just the 3rd straight loss. So, and potentially
also the 5th straight loss to LSU.
Yeah. So it's not looking good. And Billy Napier, it's just year 2. You know, I hate when the seat starts to heat up in year 2, but man, year 2 is a year that a lot of guys show a lot of promise. And like we talked about Heupel, like the year 2 bump and the year 3 slump, I prepared Tennessee fans for that this offseason. But when you don't even have a year 2 bump, like, where do we go from here? You miss a bowl game. That's a little bit different level than not making the SEC championship game or something. You know, not going to New Year's Six bowl. That's one thing, but to miss a bowl game altogether, the seat's got to warm up in year 3, and I don't think they're going at Missouri or beating Florida State, even though that one is at home. That would salvage the entire season. Beating Florida State and, you know, that rivalry game, possibly ruining their season and qualifying for a bowl game. I think that would be enough to like just give you enough good vibes, because I think that's so much about what college football is. It's like it's your fans have only a certain number of opportunities to feel good about themselves. They remember feeling really bad losing to getting blown out by rival teams. But even if you go 6-6 year 2, if you're able to spoil Florida State's entire season and the Swamp is able to go nuts and celebrate that in-state rivalry, I think that would salvage it. But I think
I agree.
At this point, I'm not betting on that happening. I think Florida State's going to be a 2-touchdown favorite at least coming into the Swamp.
I mean, it was close last year, and Florida State was definitely better a year ago, and they had it at home. I think it'll be close. I think anyone who's expecting, especially Florida State.
I mean, Florida State's a better team this year, though, than they were last year.
That's fine, but look at the Pitt game. Look at Miami. Look at what's happening here week over week. I mean, Florida State's not blowing out people week over week, and those are dudes with less talent than what Florida's got on their roster. So I don't know. I would still lean Florida State, but it's a road game in the Swamp, and Florida will be up for it.
For sure. And the last thing, just talking about Florida State, when you run through some of these like hypothetical college football playoff scenarios, like they take care of business they're in, but it does feel like they're kind of playing with fire. Some of these games are getting a little close. I don't know how that wasn't a safety in the Miami game at one point. I can't remember the situation when Jordan Travis got tackled at the goal line, but they're playing a lot of close games. I think they're that team. If they're a 1-loss ACC champion, I think they are going to be on the outside looking in, comparing with some of those other teams' resumes. So they're going to have to run the table to get in.
Yeah. Well, we shall see, Matt Green. Penn State. This one's brutal for you. I don't even know if I want to touch this one. You were all in on Penn State. Like, I admired your Penn State optimism. You're a believer this year for this group. Not only did they not beat Ohio State and the offense just completely sputtered, they get Michigan, big noon, at home, the best scenario possible. Jim Harbaugh not allowed to coach Michigan in this game at home. They are just somehow worse offensively than what we even saw or a few weeks prior against Ohio State. Matt Green, just 2 gigantic lays of eggs. Not saying that correctly, but they lay 2 eggs in 2 separate games here. I mean, you get a down Ohio State team with Kyle McCord on the road. Like, it's tough. It's tough to win there. But to not split these 2 scenarios, one without Jim Harbaugh, one with a down Ohio State team, Matt Green, if not this year, when was it going to happen for James Franklin in this bunch? Because it just this has got to be crushing if you're a Penn State fan. I mean, you saw it. Penn State fans were booing mercilessly James Franklin when he was going back into the tunnel with teams. Like, it was pretty brutal to hear the sounds. And I mean, I don't know. I just feel like we're at a tipping point with what Franklin can ultimately accomplish at Penn State, because the recruiting's been there. They're in the blue chip ratio. They had the talent. They have the 5-star quarterback this year, 5-star running back. They had continuity on both sides of the ball and coordinators. They had a top 5 defense in the sport this year. The defense was not the problem in both of these games. The defense was actually really good in both these games for Penn State. Manny Diaz did his job. They just got crushed offensively.
It's twofold. They have a quarterback that was a 5-star recruit coming out of high school. Yes. They do not have a 5-star quarterback. Yeah. If you told me that guy was a former walk-on, I would believe you. Like, if you told me it was Sean Clifford's 6th season, I would believe you. Like, and he just switched numbers.
Does he deserve an apology? Like, I think Sean Clifford deserves an apology by all Penn State fans.
Probably. Like, he was, well, I don't know about that. He was average, and Drew Aller's come in, and he's been probably worse than Sean Clifford.
He's 100% been worse than Sean Clifford. I don't even think there's a question.
This Penn State defense is loaded, and I think this year is such a giant missed opportunity. It's hard to say they're a down Ohio State team. They're a different Ohio State team, because this defense is, one of the best in college football. They're 10-0. They're a really good team, but I'm with you. It feels like most years it's unquestioned how much more talented they are than Penn State, and they have a quarterback that's going to be a first rounder, and their offense is putting up stupid numbers. And this year they just weren't that. And so you went on the road to a team that's not a great offense, and your defense played well, but your offense did absolutely nothing. And then you got Michigan at home. Are we sure Jim Harbaugh is still alive? After that Sherrone Moore post game, man, I wasn't sure if he was locked up or something, but
someone made the point where it's like, this is how it is for everybody, though. Because someone asked, like, a non-college football fan, it's like, oh, this is like a cult. It's like a cult in Michigan. I'm like, are you new to the sport? Like, guess what? Mike Bobo, or probably not Mike Bobo, Will Muschamp definitely does an interview like that for Kirby Smart after Kirby, if he was in a similar situation. Like, he gets super upset and fired up. And
after they're caught cheating, and then it gets
like Tennessee would do the same thing. Like, it's every school, when there's this much money on the line and the cult of all these different programs, it's a cult following. Like, I'm sorry, are you new to this sport? Yeah, they all take it way too seriously, and everything is personal, and everything it's against. Michigan, it's against everybody is now the moniker. Guess what? Tennessee versus everybody was a thing after the Jeremy Pruitt stuff. Guess what? This is how it's gonna go. Like, you're gonna see.
I'm just talking about the tiers.
I'm not disagreeing. It was a little over the top for me.
I don't know where we're going with the tier. I fucking love Jim Harbaugh. I love you, Jim. This is for you. Like, I don't know. It was just so over the top. But, hopefully Jim Harbaugh is safe, and one day he'll be back on the sideline. But no, I think this Penn State, ultimately, if you're giving up 287 yards on by the other team's offense, like, your defense is playing well. But the ultimate way I was wrong about this game is I thought Penn State was going to at least slow Michigan's run game down, and J.J. McCarthy was going to have to beat them. And that's not what happened at all. They ran the ball 32 straight times at one point. Like, McCarthy had 8 pass attempts. Like, they were just picking up 4 or 5 yards every single time, busting a few here and there. And it's like, we're not going to throw the ball if you can't consistently stop us. So Penn State got some stops defensively, but if you're giving up, 250 yards on the ground, 230 yards on the ground, like, it's hard to call that a great performance. But the loss more than anything is on the shoulders of the offense, because, like, they're down. Also, I don't know why James Franklin is chasing points in the second quarter, like 14-9, kick the extra point, and it's 14-10 going into half. Like, I don't know what you're doing there, but he's down. They're down 17-9 for, like, most of the second half. Like, that's one touchdown. And I'm watching this game like, this lead is insurmountable. Where's Penn State on the field? 30-yard line? No chance they go 70 yards. Like, it was just, to be down one score for most of the second half, it felt like they were getting blown out. It felt like they had no chance to win the game. So a lot of the credit obviously has to go to Michigan. Their defense is really good, and obviously their offensive line is loaded. But it felt like I was watching a bad offense on Penn State more than watching a good defense just put the shackles on somebody, if that's fair.
Well, they also made an adjustment here. Mike Yurcich is out after this loss, so they will be in the market for new OC. Someone made the
We found a
point
scapegoat at least.
hey, but also, the answer is. It's Joe Moorhead. Like, we've seen him have success. Like, he was the OC that got away. He immediately gets the Mississippi State job after a year of doing really well at Penn State. He's a good offensive mind. I think that would be probably where you want to start. I like his offense. I like what he can do and shake things up, be very different than what they've been doing the last couple of years. But I don't know. It just, I don't know if that's going to be enough. It kind of feels like that's your last scapegoat here if you're James Franklin is, hey, it's the offense. It's not me. Like, it's the offense. So we'll see if the next OC is able to finally get them over the hump. But that will be a question for next year. Final thing here in terms of the big games of the weekend, Matt Green. Bama blows out Kentucky. I don't know why that line was really low this past week. That was a weird one. That felt like a lock of why are people in on Kentucky at home here against Bama? Bama blows them out. Milroe 6 TDs. And Bama versus Georgia is officially set, Matt Green. It's been a couple years now since we've seen these two foes face off. Bama playing really, really good football. Jalen Milroe playing at another level the last few weeks. Carson Beck playing at another level the last few weeks. I think just as a college football fan, this is where you want it to be because I think these two are going to be really fun to watch going head-to-head in Atlanta. But what say you based on what you've seen from this Bama team? And does it concern you a little bit to get this iteration in Atlanta? Are you kind of nervous about playing them?
Sir, have you learned nothing? I'm from the school of Kirby Smart, sir. We're just focused on Tennessee right now. We gotta get past the Volunteers.
I'm trying to get you past Tennessee. I want you to overlook it.
We can't look ahead. We're looking at Tennessee. This is a business trip right now. We got plenty of weeks to talk about Alabama, Georgia. But no, I think Alabama is, I think the SEC West is down on the whole. Like if you look at, is LSU the second best team in the West or Ole Miss? Like I think most years that's pretty bad for LSU. As good as their offense is, like for the second best team in the SEC West to be giving up like 35 points a game or whatever they're giving up this year, like their offense or their defense is just awful. So I feel like Alabama's kind of taking advantage of a weaker SEC West. Like after Ole Miss, who is it? Like A&M? Like they just fired their head coach. Like Arkansas is bad, Mississippi State's bad, Auburn is going to a bowl game, but they're not good. And Alabama hasn't gone to Jordan-Hare yet, so weird things can happen in Jordan-Hare. But yeah, I think right now Alabama is definitely playing the best ball they've played all season. I'm just still skeptical that Jalen Milroe is going to be able to do, what he's done in some of these games versus LSU. Because you look at what he's done against teams like Tennessee and Texas A&M, like. He was basically, held to nothing in the run game. And so if he's having to win these games with his arm, like he was able to do it at Texas A&M. But I think I'm still a little skeptical. This defense is definitely playing well. This defense is legit. But right now, Georgia looks like the better team. I think they'll definitely be favored in that matchup. But I don't know. It's hard to see a more complete team right now in college football on both sides of the ball than Georgia.
Yeah, but hey, it's going to be fun because I think this Alabama team is going to test them. The way they're playing right now, I think you're going to get a good game, and I think it's going to be a good back and forth neutral site game. So it's the last iteration of the East and West divisions, and I think it kind of makes sense. It's very poetic that we're ending with Georgia, Alabama before.
Yeah, this will be Georgia's sixth SEC championship appearance in the last 7 years. Kirby's really taken a hold of the SEC East, the last of the SEC East, like you're saying. But when what is this? This is the third or fourth, and this is the fourth Georgia Alabama. I think what is it? 2012, 2018, 2021, and now 2023. I think so. Yeah, this would be the fourth Georgia Alabama we've seen. I know we've seen at least 5 or 6. I think Florida Alabama is still the most common SEC championship, and then Georgia LSU I think have played like 4 or 5 times too. So yeah, Georgia Alabama definitely feels right. The SEC championship's not going anywhere, but so we'll still have it. It won't be this SEC East and SEC West, but we could still see plenty of more Georgia Alabama dates in Atlanta in the future. And Georgia has yet to beat Alabama in Atlanta. You obviously include that that 2017 national championship along with that list. And it hasn't been great. Mercedes-Benz Stadium or the Georgia Dome to Georgia when they play Alabama in that building.
Well, there you go. But we shall see. That's a couple weeks down the line, like you said. Tennessee, Georgia week, a little bit different than it was.
Keep the main thing, sir. We're focused on going to Knoxville right now.
Well, this weekday show we'll do in a couple days here as our preview for Week 12 in the college football season. We'll get fun. Excited to talk all things Tennessee, Georgia, and some other games. It's kind of an off week for every SEC school, just about outside of Georgia and Tennessee this weekend. But it'll be fun. I'll be in the building. We'll see how it goes. But the preview coming up later this week and all that good stuff. So, Matt Green, anything else?
It was nice having 7 SEC games this past weekend. Just everyone playing each other. We don't have quite as many of the November cupcakes, but there are a few on the docket for next week. But yeah, I'm excited for it. Tennessee, Georgia, 3:30. It should be a good one.
Let's hope so. Let's hope so, because I'll be in attendance. I don't want to just freeze and also just watch Tennessee get their brains beaten at home. That'd be great. Matt Green, always a pleasure. Talk to you soon.